Statement. Secretary of State for Health, West Streeting.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With permission, I would like to make a statement on the new hospital programme. Of all the damage the party opposite did during their time in office, the broken public finances, the broken economy and the broken NHS, of everything they broke, perhaps the most egregious is the trust they broke between the British people and their government. Not just through their scandals or by breaking the rules they imposed on the rest of the country, but by making promises which they never intended on keeping. In 2019, they told the British people that they would build 40 new hospitals over the coming decade. But there were never 40 new schemes, and many of them were extensions or refurbishments. Put simply, they weren't all new, some of them weren't hospitals, and there weren't 40 of them. 5 years passed, start dates were delayed, spades remained out of the ground, and it became clear the announcement was a work of fiction. And yet, what did the Conservative Party manifesto at last year's general elections say on the matter? It said, and I quote, "We will invest in more and better facilities, continuing to deliver 40 new hospitals by 2030. They repeated the promise, even though the Department of Health and Social Care was putting contracts out to tender for hospital building that ran until the year 2035. They repeated that commitment even after the National Audit Office found the government, and I quote, will not now deliver 40 new hospitals by 2030. They repeated it even though the government's own infrastructure watchdog deemed it to be unachievable. No one thought this promise would be met, yet the party opposite made it anyway, time and time again. Despite knowing this, Madam Deputy Speaker, when I walked into the Department of Health and Social Care on the 5th of July, what I discovered shocked me. The scheme was not just years behind schedule. The money provided by the previous government was due to run out in March, just weeks from today. On the 25th of May 2023, the then Health and Social Care Secretary stood at this dispatch box and told the House, and I quote, "Today's announcement confirms more than £20 billion of investment." The truth is that no funding had been set aside for future years. The money simply wasn't there. This was a programme built on the shaky foundation of false hope. Madam Deputy Speaker, if I was shocked by what I discovered, patients ought to be furious. Not just because the promises made to them were never going to be kept, but because they can see, when they go into hospital, how badly the health service needs new buildings. The NHS is quite literally crumbling. Lord Darcy's independent investigation found that the NHS was starved of capital investment by the previous government. Its outdated estate has hit productivity, with services disrupted at 13 hospitals every day during 2022-2023. I've visited hospitals where the roof has fallen in, pipes regularly leak, and even freeze over in winter. The Conservatives literally did not fix the roof when the sun was shining. And last Thursday, the Infrastructure and Projects Authority published its annual report for 2023-2024. Its assessment of the new hospital programme read, and I quote, "There are major issues with project definition, schedule, budget, quality and/or benefits delivery, which at this stage do not appear to be manageable or resolvable. The project may need rescoping and/or its overall viability reassessed." So that is what this government has done. Our review of the new hospital programme and the announcement I am making today will do two things. First, put the programme on a firm footing with sustainable funding so all the projects can be delivered. Second, give patients an honest, realistic, deliverable timetable that they can believe in. This Labour government is rebuilding our NHS, and as we do so, we will also rebuild trust in politics. Outside the scope of the review were the 7 hospitals built wholly or mostly from RAC. These will be rebuilt at pace to protect people's safety. Also out of scope were the hospitals already under construction or with an approved business case where building works have continued without delay. Working closely with my right honourable friend, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, we have secured 5-year waves of investment backed by £15 billion of investment over consecutive waves, averaging £3 billion a year. This funding is in addition to the £1 billion the Chancellor announced at the budget to tackle dangerous RAC and the backlog of critical maintenance, repairs and upgrades across the NHS estate. And it is in addition to the £1.5 billion we are investing in new surgical hubs, diagnostic scanners and beds. Together, this forms part of the £13.6 billion capital investment announced at the budget, the largest capital investment in our National Health Service since Labour was last in office. Madam Deputy Speaker, I will now set out the new timetable. Projects in Wave 0 are already in the advanced stages of development and will be completed within the next 3 years. These are CEDAR Programme, Phase 3 Banbury Unit, National Rehabilitation Centre in Nottinghamshire, Oriel Eye Hospital, Royal Bournemouth Hospital, St Anne's Hospital, Allenhurst Road Children's Mental Health Unit and Dorset County Hospital. Wave 1 schemes will begin construction between 2025 and 2030. These include the 7 RAC hospitals, Leighton Hospital, West Suffolk Hospital, Frimley Park Hospital, Hinchingbrook Hospital, Queen Elizabeth Hospital, James Paget Hospital and Airedale General Hospital. The other Wave 1 schemes are Poole Hospital, Milton Keynes Hospital, Brighton 3Ts Hospital, Women and Children's Hospital Cornwall, Derriford Emergency Care Hospital, Cambridge Cancer Research Hospital, Shotley Bridge Community Hospital, North Manchester General Hospital and Hillingdon Hospital. Wave 2 schemes will now begin main construction between 2030 and 2035. They are Leicester General Hospital Royal Infirmary, Watford General Hospital, the Specialist and Emergency Care Hospital in Sutton, Kettering General Hospital, Leeds General Infirmary, Musgrove Park Hospital, Princess Alexandra Hospital, Torbay Hospital and Whipps Cross Hospital, where I should declare an interest as that hospital serves my constituency. Wave 3 includes 9 schemes which will start construction between 2035 and 2039. These are St Mary's Hospital in London, Charing Cross Hospital and Hammersmith Hospital, North Devon District Hospital, Eastbourne District General Hospital, Conquest Hospital and Bexhill Hospital Scheme, Hampshire Hospitals, Royal Berkshire Hospital, Royal Preston Hospital, the Royal Lancaster Infirmary and Queen's Medical Centre and Nottingham City Hospital. Following this statement, further details of the hospital building programme will be published on my department's website and a copy of the report will be placed in the House of Commons Library. In addition, my honourable friend the Minister of State for Health will be holding meetings tomorrow to which MPs of all parties are invited to answer any further questions about these projects. To make sure that every penny of taxpayers' money is well spent and every hospital is delivered as quickly as possible, we will shortly launch a new framework for the construction of the new schemes. This will be a different way of contracting by working in partnership with industry to mitigate cost, schedule and delivery risks and saving money through a standardised design approach. This will speed up the process of opening new hospitals and provide a foundation for a collaborative supply chain partnership. We will also appoint a programme delivery partner in the coming weeks to support the delivery of crucial hospital infrastructure across the country and provide programme, project and commercial expertise. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know patients in some parts of the country will be disappointed by this new timetable. They are right to be. They were led up the garden path by 3 Conservative Prime Ministers, all promising hospitals with no credible plan for funding to deliver them, and Conservative MPs who stood on a manifesto promise they knew could never be kept. We will not treat the British people with the same contempt. We will never play fast and loose with the public's trust. The plan we have laid out today is honest, funded, and can actually be delivered. It is a serious, credible plan to build the hospitals our NHS needs. It is part of the biggest capital investment the NHS has seen since Labour was last in office, delivering not just more hospitals, but new surgical hubs, community diagnostic centres, AI-enabled scanners, radiotherapy machines, modern technology, new mental health crisis centres, and upgrades to hundreds of GP estates. It will take time, but this Labour government is determined to rebuild our NHS and rebuild trust in politics. And I commend this statement to the House.
I call Shadow Secretary of State Ed Agar.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I am grateful, as always, to the Secretary of State for his typical courtesy and advance side of his statement. Madam Deputy Speaker, Labour were prepared to make all sorts of promises in opposition to win power. They promised not to raise taxes on working people. They said they wouldn't cut the winter fuel payment, and they promised to deliver the new hospitals programme. But just as working people have found out, pensioners, farmers and businesses have found out, this is a Labour government of broken promises. It is the trust of the British people they have cynically betrayed. The Secretary of State and the Chancellor travelled the country to meet with candidates who were promising a new hospital in their local area. In fact, despite my right honourable friend, the member for Louth and Horncastle, calling them out in May of last year in this very place, warning that in the small print of Labour's health missions document, they warned they were planning to pause all of this capital investment. And yet, the Secretary of State was quoted in the Evening Standard in June of last year, saying, and I quote, "We are committed to delivering the new hospitals programme." But these are seemingly hollow words. Now those hospitals are at risk, with investment and upgrades that they deserve pushed back in some cases potentially to start as late as 2039. Voters put their trust in the party opposite to deliver on their promises, yet today they've been let down. And in response to the claims that this is perhaps because of the economic inheritance, that simply doesn't reflect the reality. And before the Secretary of State warms to the theme of the mythical 22 billion black hole, he'll know that is a figure the OBR simply failed to recognise. Let's also be clear, due to the party opposite and the Chancellor's financial mismanagement at the budget and the rising gilts, the BBC recently estimated that over this Parliament the cost of borrowing could be £10 billion higher. Just imagine what he could have been announcing today if the Chancellor of the Exchequer hadn't caused that. Madam Deputy Speaker, to govern is to choose. To choose what you spend money on, what you invest in and what you don't. The Secretary of State has pointed out the Darcy Review highlighted the need for more capital investment in the NHS, and that was right. Yet he has decided not to prioritise the delivery of these new hospitals in a rapid fashion. He'll also know how the Treasury allocate funding, with cash earmarked to the end of an SR period, but not going across it until that CSR formally concludes. It's what his government is now doing. But he will be aware the previous Secretary of State, member for North East Cambridgeshire, was very clear of the £20 billion anticipated in the next CSR to fund this. So let me be clear, we would have, as we did, prioritise the delivery of these new hospitals, as the Right Honourable Member for North East Cambridgeshire did on the 25th of May 2023 in his statement on RAC and setting out the government commitment to fund them. This Secretary of State has effectively not replicated that. We had a clear plan with that funding commitment to be formalised at the CSR to build new hospitals to a definition pretty much akin to that used by Tony Blair when building new hospitals, which were already being designed to a standardised approach with modern methods of construction as standard, being approved, being built and being completed. He's put that progress at risk. So, can he confirm that in his CSR discussions with the Chancellor of the Exchequer about the CDEL allocation for his department, he will prioritise the new hospital programme? When will the Secretary of State set out to local people in each area exactly when construction will start? And crucially, and I should declare an interest, University Hospitals of Leicester Trust serves my constituents. And when will, in each case, the doors actually be open? If the Chancellor fails to get the economy growing and starts looking yet again for cuts to fill the hole she actually has created with her budget, can the Secretary of State rule out any further delays? What assessment has he made of his lengthening of the programme's timescales to costs given inflationary pressures? Are all other capital projects and programmes previously approved safe from review? And can he, possibly via the Library of the House, if he can't do it here, just update the House on his latest assessment of the impact of RAC in those hospitals, which he rightly is continuing to prioritise? Today's announcement will come as a bitter blow to trusts, staff and, crucially, patients who believe the party opposite and will now be left waiting even longer for vital investment. Yet again, before the election, they talk the talk, but it's patients who lose out when this government fails to deliver. In yet again, kicking the can down the road, as is increasingly their habit, they have sadly betrayed the trust of the British people.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition said this weekend that she will be honest about the mistakes of the Conservative government. It seems that the Shadow Health Secretary didn't get the memo. But if the Leader of the Opposition is serious about showing some contrition, she might want to start here. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, in 2020, the Department of Health and Social Care requested funds from the Treasury to rebuild the 7 RAC hospitals. That request was denied, setting back the necessary rebuild of those hospitals by years. He will remember, as he was a minister in the department at the time. And which of his colleagues was a minister in the Treasury when it blocked the rebuild of the RAC hospitals? That's right, the Leader of the Opposition. That's her record, and she should apologise. And once again, like the arsonist turning to the scene of the crime to criticise the fire brigade for not responding fast enough, they have the audacity to come here and talk about a failure to deliver when promise after promise was broken, and he was the Chief Secretary who had to come in to clean up the mess caused by Liz Truss's mini-budget. That's what crashing the economy looks like, and they haven't still had the decency, even under new leadership, to apologise. If the Shadow Health Secretary genuinely believes all of these projects could be delivered by 2030, which was the commitment in his manifesto and all of theirs, I invite him to publish today their plan for doing it. How would he ensure the funding, the labour supply, the building materials and planning to build the remaining projects in the next 5 years? Which capital programmes would he be cutting? Which taxes would he be increasing? Because he knows as well as anyone else, those are the choices that face government. And while he's doing that, maybe he can tell us what he can see that the National Audit Office can't see, the Infrastructure and Projects Authority can't see, and the eyes in my head can't see. What was their plan past March when the money runs out? What taxes would they raise? What capital projects would they cut to invest even more than we are in hospital buildings? The biggest capital investment since Labour was last in office. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, while he's answering those questions, he might want to, with the Shadow Cabinet and with the members behind him, reflect on the other messes that this government is having to clear up. Because as I look around the Cabinet table, I see an Education Secretary with crumbling schools, a Justice Secretary without enough prison places, a Defence Secretary dealing with a more dangerous world, a Transport Secretary having to rebuild our country's crumbling infrastructure, and a Deputy Prime Minister building the homes we need. In short, multiple crises of their making. It's a massive rebuilding job to do in Britain, and we are getting on with it.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you so much. I think my point will be unlike any other members in the House, in that the Specialist and Emergency Care Hospital in Sutton is in Tier 2 of these schemes. Can I say to the Secretary of State, as I have said to every Secretary of State for Health over the last 25 years, No one wants this. They want the services at St Helier Hospital to remain at St Helier, where the people who are poorest and most ill need them. Will he look at this £500 million scheme and see if it's really necessary?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. That will be a unique conversation and representation this afternoon. And already I can hear the vultures swooping, looking for a capital allocation and her slot in the pipeline. Look, she has made this case repeatedly and forcefully about her strong conviction that these services should remain in a community with high levels of deprivation and high need. I know my honourable friend, the Minister of State, has already committed to meeting with her, and we're very happy to have those conversations with her.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Dr Danny Chambers.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in Hampshire and around the rest of the country, in 2019 and 2024, Conservative MPs stood on the promise of delivering new hospitals, including one for Hampshire, and it turned out there was never any funding, and it was just false promises to try and get votes. And I've fought tirelessly to save and improve Winchester's A&E and the consultant-led maternity. Now, with the announcement that the construction for a proposed new hospital in Hampshire won't even be started until between 2037 and 2039, we absolutely need to ensure that the current services are invested in and improved so that they do remain fit for purpose. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, given that the new hospital programme is delayed, this means it is more urgent than ever to increase capacity by fixing social care, so that those who are well enough to leave hospital can be cared for in the community, thus freeing up beds immediately. Now, we cannot endure both insufficient social care packages and crumbling hospitals. Given this delay to the new hospital programme, will the Secretary of State commit to prioritising more social care packages now, rather than waiting 3 years for a review to be complete? And while we understand the Health Secretary is not responsible for inheriting the current state of the NHS or the current state of the economy, the new hospital programme was seen as part of the solution to NHS in crisis, and people across the sector have warned that delaying the new hospital programme will only mean more treatments cancelled and more money wasted on plugging holes in hospital buildings that are no longer fit for purpose. And so we're really concerned that one of the biggest announcements affecting the NHS over the next few years is coming out right now during Donald Trump's inauguration, because it will not get the attention and the media attention that it deserves. And so Liberal Democrats were urging the Health Secretary to promise to release a full impact assessment and how the delay to the new hospital programme will affect patients and NHS staff.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Taking those points in turn, I mean, firstly, with enormous respect for the momentous democratic event taking place in Washington today, I don't think that the new president, last time I checked, has declared an interest in any of our hospital schemes, and I'm sure will forgive us for getting on with the job of British government, even as the American handover takes place. I committed to come to the House in the new year some time ago. I have kept that promise, and I dare say the decisions that we are taking and setting out today will receive good coverage. I would also reassure him and other members across the House with an interest in particular schemes that my honourable friend the Minister and officials from the programme team will be happy to meet with members across the House as early as tomorrow to take questions on individual schemes. He raises broader challenges about the NHS and social care pressures in our country. That is why the Chancellor prioritised investment in our NHS and social care services in the budget, £26 billion of additional funding for my department for health and social care. And of course, on social care specifically, we've taken a number of actions in our first 6 months, from fair pay agreements for care professionals, the biggest expansion of carers allowance since the 1970s, an uplift in funding for local authorities, including specific ring-fence funding for social care, and we will be setting out further reforms throughout this year. as well as Phase 1 of the Casey Commission reporting next year for the duration of this Parliament. And look, members opposite can't have it both ways. They can't keep on welcoming the investment and opposing the means of raising it. If they don't support the Chancellor's budget, which is their democratic right, they have to say which services would they cut or which alternative taxes they would raise. Welcome to opposition, folks. We've been there. Enjoy the ride. You'll be there for some time. And finally, let me just say to the Liberal Democrats who've constructively raised a range of challenges. This is at the heart of the challenge facing this government, because he's right to mention the capital challenges facing the secondary care estate. The same is true of the primary care estate, the community and mental health estate, and as I spelled out, every single one of my cabinet colleagues also has significant capital pressures. That is the consequence of 14 years of underinvestment in our public infrastructure and in our public services, which means we are paying a hell of a lot more for their failure than we would have done had they built on, rather than demolished, Labour's record of the shortest waiting times and the highest patient satisfaction in history.
Danny Beales.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today's announcement is welcome for my constituents in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, and it confirms that we're keeping the promises that we made in 2023 to deliver Hillingdon Hospital in the first term of a Labour government. So I thank my right honourable friend for that commitment. But we also know that shamefully my predecessor and his predecessor misled my constituents. We were told, my predecessor stood here, almost where I'm standing today, and told my constituents that Hillingdon Hospital was fully funded and construction has started. We now know that that simply was not true. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that it's vital that today's statement outlines a fully funded programme that is deliverable, that's an honest assessment of when hospitals will be delivered, and can he confirm that that is the case?
Secretary of State.
Firstly, can I thank my honourable friend for the strong representations he's made on behalf of his constituents, not just since his election to this place, but indeed before his election to this place. In fact, in between the by-election and his election to this place too, he didn't give up and continue to fight for his community. And I stood outside Hillingdon Hospital, having had a good look around the state of the hospital and the plans for the reconstruction of the site. And I'm delighted to have kept my promise, and indeed this government's promise, so that construction at Hillingdon Hospital will begin in 2027-2028. He's quite right to say his predecessor and his predecessor's predecessor made claims about Hillingdon Hospital that were not true. This government is not going to make those mistakes. We will keep our promise, and what we've set out for all schemes on the new hospitals programme is a credible, realistic, funded timetable that this government, for as long as there is a Labour government, will actually deliver.
Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
Will the Secretary of State just forgive me if I give us a few seconds respite from the blame game by trying to make a positive suggestion? Everybody accepts the real problem facing our hospitals is the number of frail and elderly people who don't need to be in hospital and should be in some sort of care facility. I wonder whether he thinks that whilst building brand new all singing, dancing hospitals are very expensive, there is a future for smaller cottage hospitals like Gainsborough, and opening other facilities so that we can move elderly, frail people out of these big hospitals into a caring environment and free up space.
Secretary of State.
Can I thank the right honourable gentleman for a rare constructive contribution from those benches. Can I, not from him, he's regularly constructive, it's the rest of the Conservative Party we have a problem with. If I just sort of reassure him that one of the things that we are determined to do is deliver a shift in the centre of gravity out of hospitals into communities with care closer to home and indeed in people's homes. And as I saw recently on a visit to Carlisle, sometimes good intermediate step-down accommodation provides both better care quality of care and appropriate care at better value for taxpayers. In fact, where I was over the New Year in Carlisle, that intermediate care facility funded through the NHS by a social care setting, was providing great quality rehab in a nicer environment at half the cost of the NHS bed up the road. So this government will deliver both better care and better value for taxpayers.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm really glad that my right honourable friend has got a grip of the hospital building programme and also developed a pipeline of being able to schedule the new hospitals. York isn't on that list. However, in 10 to 15 years, being one of the cheapest hospitals that was built, it certainly will need to be there. Can he set out how he will review hospitals which aren't on the list and schedule them into future programmes?
Secretary of State.
Of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, we do keep a regular eye on the capital needs of the NHS right across the board, and subject to the usual constraints of resources and supply chain, construction industry capacity and so on, we will continue to do that. We're determined as a government not to repeat the mistakes of our predecessors and to make sure the promises we make are actually promises that we can keep.
Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Prior to the calling of the general election, there was a clear indication from government that they intended to fund the £25 million only reconstruction of the maternity unit at Margate Hospital, the QEQM hospital, which emerged from the Bill Kirkup report. I'd be grateful if the Secretary of State could tell me whether or not it is his intention to ensure that that funding is made available. And while I'm on my feet, in view of the fact that he referred to the number of houses that the Secretary of State for Housing is determined to see built, could he also say, for the sake of East Kent, how the secondary healthcare services will be provided to meet the needs of the people that are going to live in those houses?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very aware of the challenges in East Kent and the challenges both in terms of making sure we provide the good quality care that's provided and also in the facilities that people need, and I'm sure ministers will be happy to receive representations from the honourable gentleman. He also asked about the government's commitment to building 1.5 million more homes. I'd like to reassure him and the House that the Deputy Prime Minister and I, as well as other members of the Cabinet, are discussing very carefully how we make sure that alongside the new homes our country needs, we're also making sure we've got the infrastructure and public services that people deserve.
Ben Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My predecessor in Chelsea and Fulham claimed to have secured the funding for Charing Cross Hospital. It went out on election literature throughout the constituency. At the time, I doubted it. Today's announcement confirms without any doubt that the money was not there. It was not true what he was saying. And I welcome the honesty and the realism of the government's statement today. It's about time we have a government, the British people have a government which is playing straight with them and telling them the truth. And what I would like to see, instead of the laughing and the jeering from the benches opposite, which is of no use to my constituents in Chelsea and Fulham who were promised the money for Charing Cross Hospital when it was never there, I would like to see some contrition. And may I ask the Secretary of State, on a more positive note, can he assure my constituents that the timetable he set out will be met?
Secretary of State.
I can give my honourable friend that assurance, and can I thank him for the very strong representations he's made on behalf of his local trust since his election to this House. It is, I'm afraid, shameful the extent to which promises were made about this scheme that could not be kept. I can reassure him that pre-construction work will take place across 2030 to 2035. As he knows, this is not a straightforward project, but it's one we are very much committed to, with construction due to start around 2036. I'm very happy to continue to work with him and other neighbouring honourable and right honourable members to make sure the Trust is supported during this period, given some of the challenges they face on a day-to-day basis.
Tim Farron.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The acute hospital which serves most of my constituency in Westmoreland is the Royal Lancaster Infirmary. It's a Victorian overcrowded hospital, in parts falling to bits with inadequate car parking and absolutely at the wrong end of a one-way system. With his help, the local hospital trust has acquired an almost perfect site for a rebuild. They've designed it and they've even begun consulting the public upon it. And so today's announcement is going to come as something as a bombshell, that we have a 10-year wait until a spade even is dug into the ground. Will he reconsider the timescale? Not least because the longer we leave it, the more the build cost will spiral, and I'm afraid the less likely people will have confidence it will even happen at all.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, on the final point the right honourable gentleman makes, I can well understand why people across the country will be cynical about commitments made on hospitals, given the experience they've had under our Conservative predecessors. That is why, even if it is not universally popular in terms of every decision we are taking, I hope people will firstly appreciate the upfront candour and honesty and not trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, and setting out in the report today in terms the timetable for pre-construction work and construction starting. And I hope in his case in particular, the fact that land was acquired in December 2024 by this government signals our absolute commitment to this scheme. If we were not committed to the scheme, we wouldn't have made the land purchase up front ahead of pre-construction works, which are planned from 2030. We did so because we absolutely accept the case he's making about the desirability of that site, the need for the investment and the new hospital locally, and as well as the representations from the right honourable gentleman, my honourable friend, the member for Lancaster, wins the award for being the first MP to collar me straight after the election to say, buy this land and do it now.
Liz Twist.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So, after years of broken Tory promises on new hospitals, can the Secretary of State confirm today that my constituents, following this review, in Bladen and Consett, can at last be confident that we have an honest, realistic and deliverable timetable that they can believe in?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for the representations she's consistently made, not just since but ahead of the general election. I think her constituents will particularly welcome the investment being made in Shotley Bridge Community Hospital, which will be in Wave 1, starting construction in 2026-27. I know that's not the only need for health and care provision in her constituency, and I know we'll continue to work together to make sure her constituents start to experience an improving NHS as opposed to being lumbered with the broken one that was left behind by the Conservatives.
Damien Hines.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. This announcement today will come as a terrible blow to people served by Basingstoke and North Hampshire Hospital, particularly after the very personal commitment made by the now Prime Minister in June 2024. We assume from what he says today that come the spending review, the government will be setting out detailed capital budgets stretching into the 2040s. But can he tell us in the meantime what his announcement today does to his projection for operating costs, for repairs and maintenance costs, and the provision of stopgap facilities where they're needed?
Madam Deputy Speaker, given the right honourable gentleman served in the Cabinet under successive Conservative governments, I think he's got some brass neck, frankly, turning up today, complaining in the way that he has. He wants to talk about the costs being greeted upon the country. He should look in the mirror at the costs that he and his colleagues in government lumbered on this country when they imposed over a decade of austerity, of Trussonomics, of the worst sort of kamikaze ideological project that this country has experienced in modern times. And I would just remind him, and those on the opposite benches who are living in an alternate reality where they bear no responsibility for their actions only months ago, that the National Audit Office said, and I quote, By the definition the government used in 2020, it will not now deliver 40 new hospitals by 2030. And the Infrastructure and Projects Authority gave the scheme a red rating, saying the project appears to be unachievable, the project may need to be rescoping and/or its overall viability reassessed. What on earth does he think that record did for NHS managers, given the stop-start, stop-start? What on earth does he think this did to communities that were seeking certainty and assuming that the promises made by the Conservatives would be kept? They said in their manifesto, only last July, they would deliver 40 new hospitals by 2030. Well, by the NAO's definition and the IPA's report, that was never going to be kept. They knew it, they didn't care, they just said what they wanted to try and win votes, and that's disgraceful.
And members will have seen how many people are on their feet wanting to ask the Secretary of State a question. Could I ask members to please try and keep their questions and their answers quite short, because I do want to try and get everybody in if it's all possible. Graham Stringer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend's statement stands in sharp contrast to the statement on the 25th of May 2023 by the previous Secretary of State, when he completely forgot to put in his statement, both written and verbal, North Manchester General Hospital. So I am pleased that North Manchester General Hospital today is in the first wave, but I would be grateful if my right honourable friend could spell out in detail when the work will continue, because the scheme in one of the areas of the country with the worst health outcomes is not only a hospital scheme, it's an urban regeneration scheme, and some work has started. Will that work be allowed to continue? Can I give some detail, please?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his question, and that he is right about the sorry state that North Manchester Hospital has been left in by our Conservative predecessors, not least the critical infrastructure risk at that hospital. Most of the existing estate dates back to the 1870s, and NHS leaders, managers and staff are having to deal with multiple day-to-day operational issues, including poor fabric with fire safety, ventilation, asbestos and water management issues. That's why I'm delighted to confirm to my honourable friend that the work will continue and construction will start in 2027 to 2028. And I'm looking forward to working with him, other Greater Manchester MPs, the council leader of the City Council and the Mayor of Greater Manchester to make sure that this project delivers for the health and wider economic benefits and needs of the people of Greater Manchester.
Kit Malthouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Knowing the way government finance works, sadly today the Secretary of State knows that he has in effect cancelled the replacement of Basingstoke Hospital. This is despite, as my right honourable friend saying, the Prime Minister going there during the election campaign and making a specific, unequivocal, unconditional promise that the hospital would be replaced by 2030. Sadly, it looks like that will now not be the case, and I'm sure the member for Basingstoke sitting here will be considering his position as well, given the promises he made. Are we, though, able to rescue something from this wreckage by purchasing the site? As the Secretary of State will know, on that site in particular, we are likely now to lose the land. It is a critical site. Can we please buy it before it slips from our grasp?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, we're happy to receive sensible representations from members about their projects, as we've received from my honourable friend, the member for Basingstoke. It's a bit rich for members opposite to talk about understanding how public finances work.
Anna Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last autumn, I met with the Secretary of State to discuss the rebuild of rat-infested Airedale General Hospital, and I'd like to reiterate my thanks on behalf of my constituents who are being treated as patients in wards propped up and the ceiling falling in, for his and the ministerial team's commitment to ensure this vital new hospital goes ahead with a deliverable timetable and a sustainable funding plan. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the previous government's commitments to deliver 40 new hospitals by 2030 was, as the NAO itself concluded, both disingenuous and unrealistic?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for her question, and we are very fortunate to have someone with her experience on social care and health issues in the House. She has already done an outstanding job representing her constituents, who I know will not only welcome the news that Airedale General Hospital will begin construction in 2027 to 28, but also be appalled that as a RAC hospital, work could have been well underway already were the request for funding from the Department for Health and Social Care not denied by the woman who is now the leader of the Conservative Party.
Andrew George.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. May I sympathise with the Secretary of State for finding that he had to pull these projects out of the fire of unfunding, but also thank him for the announcement with regard to the Women and Children's Hospital in Cornwall. I know that all my parliamentary colleagues in Cornwall will be delighted at the news today, but could I, and I also sympathise with those other colleagues that find themselves in waves 2 and 3, but could I ask the Secretary of State what he can do to ensure that we can crack on with the enabling work and to ensure that this project is delivered in double quick time. It is desperately needed, and certainly a 2030 finish date actually will be challenging for Cornwall, so if it could be brought forward, that would be much appreciated.
Secretary of State.
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker, I am grateful for the way in which he posed his question, and I can confirm to him that obviously pre-construction work is ongoing. Construction is due to start in 2027, 2029. And I'd just say, particularly to members opposite, a lot has been said about what this party said pre-election. I just give them a role model in how to do honesty ahead of an election. I stood outside the hospital, Royal Cornwall Hospital, and I was asked by local media whether I would commit to a specific timetable. And what I said was, we've committed to the new hospitals programme. In terms of the new Women's and Children's Hospital at the Royal Cornwall Hospital, we're committed to seeing that through, and I know enabling work's underway. I think beyond that, we're going to take an honest look at the books. That's the approach I took as Shadow Health and Social Care Secretary, and that is how to do it, to under-promise and then over-deliver.
Alec Serval.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Leeds General Infirmary got outline planning permission in 2020. 2 Conservative Prime Ministers came to Leeds and promised they would get our new hospital, knowing that the funding wasn't there in the Treasury. I'd like to thank my honourable friend for visiting the LGI. Now that we know that we're in wave 2, can he meet with me and the Chief Executive to talk about one of the largest maintenance backlogs in the NHS, how we're going to cope with that intervening period, and how we're going to be able to move forward and hit wave 2 running and get our hospital built before we need to close down our children's services, which are at risk?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his question and for highlighting the extent to which Leeds General Infirmary has been let down over 14 years of Conservative government, with the initial underinvestment and then the total inactivity we saw since, apart from leaving a big pile of dirt outside the hospital, which I went to see myself with the Chancellor as then Shadow Chancellor. And we're both committed to this project. We know how important it is. We have had to phase the programme in a way that we can say is genuinely affordable and deliverable and credible along this timetable, which is why I can reassure my honourable friend that pre-construction work will take place over 2030 to 2032, with construction due to start in 2033 to 2035. And we'd be delighted to receive representation from MPs from his city and across the region about the support we provide to the Trust in the meantime.
Robbie Moore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Airedale Hospital has some of the worst RAC out of all of the hospitals on the new hospital rebuilding programme. Indeed, all the surveys that have been undertaken have said that parts of the hospital will have no life expectancy given the risk profile associated with RAC beyond 2030, which is why the completion date of 2030 was so important. And with those funds having been allocated to that project for it to be delivered, it's disappointing to hear today that the start date will be between 2025 and 2030. So can I ask the Secretary of State, when is Airedale Hospital, the new rebuild, likely to be open? And can the Health Secretary provide the Trust with confidence that additional funds will be there and available to help with the mitigation that needs to take place before the new hospital can open to keep the existing hospital operational?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, if he's disappointed with this government, he's going to be absolutely furious when he finds out who was in power before. In fact, I tell you what, he's a dead ringer for the guy I used to see on this side of the House, cheering on and voting for every calamitous decision they took, including crashing the economy and including supporting his leader, the leader of the opposition, when she rejected appeals to fund RAC hospitals. We're prioritising them, we're going as fast as we can, and I'll tell you what, it'll happen under a Labour government. It didn't happen under the Tories, did it?
Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the honesty with which my right honourable friend is approaching this, because false promises are just not what governments should do. I had the chance to visit a couple of the RAC hospitals, and the Public Accounts Committee, which I used to chair, examined in detail Hospital 2.0, this standardised approach he talks about. It did have some quite startling assumptions, so I just hope he can reassure me and the House that he's looked into those in detail and that we are absolutely sure on these dates of delivery.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend for her question, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I can reassure her that the approach that we're taking, particularly the steps we'll be taking in the coming weeks in terms of the outline for scheme delivery, the appointment of a partner, gives me the confidence and assurance to know that the timetable we set out is affordable and credible. Of course, I'm always happy to receive advice as well as representations from my right honourable friend who knows a huge amount about what she speaks.
Lee Dillon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In a few weeks' time, I'll celebrate my 42nd birthday, and I was born at the Royal Berks Hospital in Newbury. With the Secretary of State's announcement today, I think I'll be celebrating my 60th birthday when it's due to open. Can the Secretary of State talk us through how operational budgets will be increased at hospitals like the Royal Berks that currently has over £200 million of backlog of repairs, which then can stop operations and procedures happening? And how will the government make sure that money is in place while we wait these 14 years for our new hospital?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm getting there slightly earlier than the honourable gentleman. It's my birthday. My 42nd birthday is tomorrow. So I will look forward to the cards in the post. But more seriously, Madam Deputy Speaker, look, he is right to say that in terms of the phasing of the programme, look, we have taken an approach that makes sure that we can stand up and look his constituents and others in the eye and say we've got an affordable programme and one that can be delivered according to the timetable that's set out. I know people will be disappointed by the length of time, and I'm genuinely sorry that they were led up the garden path by our predecessors, and that is why we've taken an approach that says that honesty is the best policy. We'd rather be upfront about the length of time now, and in the meantime making sure we're delivering the investment and reform needed to reduce waiting times, improve primary and community and social care services, so that even as work continues to prepare for the Royal Berkshire Hospital scheme, his constituents and others across Berkshire begin to experience an improving NHS under Labour as opposed to the broken one they experienced under the Conservatives.
Olivia Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I welcome the firm commitment that the Secretary of State has just made to a new Royal Berkshire Hospital. My constituents will share my disappointment at the delay to its construction. I agree with my honourable friend that the blame for this delay lies squarely with the Conservatives, who promised new hospitals without setting aside the money to pay for them. But can I ask my friend if he will visit the Royal Berkshire Hospital to discuss the interim capital funding we will need as we wait for Wave 3, and to see for himself how important it is that our new hospital is built as soon as possible?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Look, Madam Deputy Speaker, no one has fought harder for the Royal Berkshire Hospital scheme than my honourable friend, and her honourable friend sat beside her. They have worked incredibly hard as a team to make the case for investment in health and social care across Berkshire. I'd be delighted to come and visit, because she's quite right that even as people wait for this particular hospital scheme, there's a lot we can, must and will do to improve health and social care services across her constituency, across Berkshire, and I'm very much looking forward to working with them to achieve that.
James Wilde.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the Health Secretary has recognised the urgency of replacing the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Kings Lynn due to the RAC safety issues, which I and my constituents are grateful for and which reflects the position of the last Conservative government. In his statement, he said he was working at pace to rebuild QEH. So will he instruct the NHS to expedite the business case approvals for the new multi-storey car park, which is the key enabling project, and will he commit to the 2030 deadline, which is the end of life of the hospital?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in terms of Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Kings Lynn, we do recognise the challenge because of RAC, and that's the approach we took from the outset. I can confirm that the programme will be starting construction in 2027 to 2028. It is due to complete in 2032 to 33, but it will be prioritised for expedition as a RAC scheme. If we can go faster, we will go faster. I think I'm setting out today a credible timetable. If we're able to under-promise and over-deliver, I'll be delighted. But I can reassure him, firstly, we're going as far and as fast as we possibly can, given the safety challenges. And secondly, say to him, if he's not happy with the pace, he should reflect on the fact that one of the local MPs was a former Prime Minister. She had the chance to get on with it, and I hope I don't get a legal letter. She didn't deliver, did she?
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For nearly 25 years now, I've been part of campaigns to either save or rebuild Whipps Cross Hospital. For the last 10 years, I've stood shoulder to shoulder with the Secretary of State. So I know, and let me put on the record for him because he can't say it, his pain and frustration that we are now talking about 8 years to restart the building works that have already started at Whipps Cross that will deliver finally the new hospital we need and 1,000 new homes in our community. It is devastating to all of us, but we can see from the list there is the possibility for hospitals to move between the different ways because some have. Given that, and given that there are examples of funding sources that can be put together, can I ask him to organise, we know about his conflict of interest, for all of us as MPs affected by this, whose constituents use Whipps Cross, to have an urgent meeting to look at those criteria, to look at those possible new sources of funding, because we owe it to our constituents, and I know he will believe this and agree this myself, not to give up fighting for the hospital that our community so desperately needs.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for her question. As she says, I must declare an interest as the Whipps Cross Hospital and Barts Health NHS Trust serves my constituents. I'd be delighted to lead a delegation with my honourable friend to lobby my honourable friend, the Minister of State for Health, who has to take decisions on schemes that affect my constituency. It'd be nice to be on the other side of exchanges for the first time in a while. But let me just reassure her constituents and mine that pre-construction work on Whipps Cross Hospital is due to begin in 2029 to 2031, with construction beginning in 2032 to 2034. I think my constituents know me well enough to know that if we could go faster, we absolutely would. She talks about alternative investment vehicles, means of raising capital, additional capital investment, notwithstanding learning from some of the less successful initiatives of the past. I'd be delighted to work with Treasury colleagues and honourable and right honourable members on this side of the House to look at how we can get more capital investment. But as I say, for reasons she'll well understand, we do need to tread carefully on that point.
Steve Darling.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I would like to acknowledge that the Secretary of State inherited Torbay Hospital, where we've had almost 700 sewage leaks, many of them impacting on clinical areas of the hospital, and sadly that is set to continue. The hospital operates at 98% capacity of its beds that will only result in poorer services for residents. That is set to continue. Will the Secretary of State reflect on the fact that many people in Torbay will fear that they've suffered in our low-wage economy the impact of the national insurance hikes, but without seeing much of the gains for our hospital?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd say two things to the honourable gentleman. Firstly, we absolutely recognise the need for investment in Torbay Hospital. We are committed to it, and that's what this programme commits us to deliver, with pre-construction work beginning from 2030 to 2032 and construction beginning in 2033 to 2035. I would just say to the honourable gentleman and others opposite who oppose the decision the Chancellor's taken in the budget, they can't welcome the investment on one hand and oppose the means of raising it on the other, unless, of course, they spell out which services they would cut or which alternative taxes they would increase. That's the challenge that we face. The Chancellor's had to do a hell of a lot of heavy lifting to clean up the mess left by the Conservatives, and I support her decisions.
Mary Rimmer.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I thank the Minister? He's doing what he should be doing and what should have been done before, telling truth to the people and the Commons here. But I'll not waste any time. Can I urge the Secretary of State to get his appropriate Minister, if not himself, to visit Western Hospital and St Helens Local Authority, and they'll prove to you how you can make it work better than it is at the present time with proper integrated health and social care. Please pay a visit. It's worth it. You can't afford not to go.
Secretary of State.
Can I? There's an offer I can't refuse, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend's a great champion for health and care services in her community and has enormous experience in local government too. And we are always looking for best practice. We want to take the best of the NHS to the rest of the NHS, and we'd be delighted to hear more about the success in her community.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Secretary of State will be aware, myself and surrounding MPs wrote to him beginning of December to talk about Watford General. I'm sure I speak on behalf of the two Labour MPs, the one Lib Dem and my colleague on my side, that we're all disappointed that he's decided to delay reconstruction of Watford General till at least 2030 starting. Notwithstanding my public disappointment, given that all six of us would have campaigned actively on investment in Watford General, the statement refers to further details will be provided in the hospital building programme. If there are assumptions made in there that we wish to challenge, things like build cost, do we go to the Secretary of State or the Minister of State with those questions?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend, the Minister of State, will be holding briefings for members from across the House tomorrow and, of course, is happy to receive further questions. He, on one hand, seems to be saying go faster. On the other hand, he's saying he wants to challenge underlying assumptions in the scheme. He can't have it both ways. And as I said to some of his honourable friends on that side of the House, if he's disappointed with this government as we clean up the mess they left behind, goodness knows the self-loathing he felt when they were in government.
Dr. Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I feel doubly blessed this afternoon for the West Suffolk Hospital in my constituency is to be rebuilt, and the James Paget Hospital, where I've worked for 30 years, is to be rebuilt, so I may be uniquely blessed. But would the Secretary of State agree with me that our primary care estate is in a terrible situation, and we must also invest in general practice facilities?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With that track record, he might want to tell us this week's lottery numbers while he's here as well. But look, in all seriousness, my honourable friend makes a really good point, because while today's statement is about the new hospitals programme, the challenges across the health and social care estate are enormous. That's why the Chancellor committed at the budget the capital investment that will not only deliver this programme, but also a significant investment in the general practice estate too. We have an enormous array of capital challenges in health and social care, and what I ask members on all sides of the House to bear in mind, if I have to struggle and weigh up the competing priorities across the health and social care budget, the Chancellor and the Chief Secretary have to do that on not only the NHS and social care, but education, on transport, on defence, on justice, on the police estate. Right across the board, we have inherited a country left in an enormous hole. We are taking the necessary decisions to get our country out of that hole and be a path to a better future.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the hospitals that my constituents and wider Buckinghamshire residents rely on for treatment is Wickham Hospital. Wickham is not a RAC hospital, but severe maintenance issues in the ageing tower mean they're losing about 2,000 hours of operating time a year. So in the spirit of the transparency the Secretary of State speaks of, can he let the House know where the urgent works at Wickham are left given the elongation of the new hospitals programme, and will he meet with me to constructively discuss how we move it forward so that Wickham can get the new surgical hub it needs?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We're always open to constructive representations. And as I said in my statement, with the capital envelope the Chancellor has given my department, the biggest since Labour was last in office, that includes funding for exactly the sort of challenges of maintenance backlogs and disrepair of the NHS estate. It's not just about new units or new hospitals, it's also about making sure that the current estate can deliver the quality of care and the value for money that our constituents deserve, and we'd be happy to take representations from it.
Mark Sewards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given that the Conservatives made promises about 40 new hospitals that they knew they couldn't deliver, they knew they couldn't build, and now it turns out they knew they couldn't pay for by 2030, it is little wonder that trust is so low in politics at the moment. It's also little wonder, given the absolutely unedifying display we've seen from their front bench today, that they are sat on the benches opposite us, and it falls on this government to take the decisions that they ducked while they were in power. Given that trust is so low, though, what reassurances can the Secretary of State give my constituents in Leeds South West and Morley that the Leeds General Infirmary, the LGI, will be delivered according to the timetable that he has set out today?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his representation and the outstanding work he has done since his election to this House to represent the people of Leeds. I can reassure his constituents that this is a credible timetable, a funded timetable, and a timetable we can stick to, and I'm determined to make sure that we do. And as for promises made opposite, I mean, we saw the crocodile tears at the weekend from the Leader of the Opposition saying that she will admit where they got things wrong, but she never, ever gives a specific example. In fact, we've heard more about steak sandwiches than humble pie since the election.
Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The previous Conservative government promised the people of West Hertfordshire that we would have a new hospital, and they even claimed that it was fully funded, so our sense of betrayal is incredibly acute. But today, the Labour government has announced that the rebuild start for Watford General has been pushed back by 7 to 9 years without ministers even visiting Watford General, and even though we know it is shovel-ready. We have the land, we have the planning permission, we have done the enabling work. So can the Secretary of State please say, why is it that there are 23 hospitals ahead of Watford General, and what money will be made available for the repair bills, which will inevitably pile up for the best part possibly of another decade, whilst our hospital is left to crumble?
Secretary of State.
Well, I can well understand the honourable member's anger on behalf of her constituents in St Albans who are invested in this project, as are the constituents of my honourable friend, the member for Watford, and my honourable friend, the member for Hemel Hempstead too. You'll be able to see when in the report which we're placing online and in the library, the methodology we followed to assess prioritisation and ordering of schemes, which was about affordability, deliverability and the other factors she would expect us to take into account. And that's how we reached the decision today. I can reassure her and her constituents that pre-construction work will begin from 2028 to 2030, with construction beginning in 2031 to 2033. And to all of her constituents who are extremely angry about the delays, I know they don't need to be told where the blame lies. That's why they returned a Liberal Democrat MP instead of a Conservative.
I am planning to run this statement until 6 o'clock, so if members could please help each other out and keep their questions and answers short. Rosie Writing.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My predecessor told my constituents in Kettering that the work on Kettering General Hospital was ready to go, and it is shameful that in reality the Conservatives had no credible plan and the money was going to run out in March this year. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that Kettering people are right to be angry at the previous government for breaking their promises? And can he reassure my constituents that they will see a realistic, deliverable timeframe for the rebuild of our hospital?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend who's raised this issue consistently and persistently with me since she was elected to this House, and I can reassure her and her constituents that pre-construction work will begin from 2028 to 2030, with construction starting in 2031 to 2032. I'm extremely sorry to her constituents that they were led up the garden path. I rather feel that they had already rumbled the Conservatives by sending her to Parliament, but for as long as there is a Labour government, we will deliver for the people of Kettering.
Lincoln Job.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'll say it because no one else is. Many happy returns for tomorrow. I genuinely thought you were in your mid-30s. The Secretary of State is in his mid-30s.
And Madam Deputy Speaker.
And Madam Deputy Speaker, she's happy with that.
Well done,
and can I also congratulate the Secretary of State for coming here with such a massive capital expenditure announcement and eliciting a saving with the answer to the first question for the honourable member for Mitcham and Morden. So, one of the plans which went by the board in May, for reasons I haven't quite got to the bottom of, is for the Staines Health and Wellbeing Centre, which is one of the community diagnostic hubs, one of only 6 in England, which NHS England had allocated. The funding got pulled in May. Would you please have another look at it?
Secretary of State.
Can I thank him very much for that representation? I think he's going to go far in this place, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd be delighted to look favourably upon his representations about his local facilities.
Sir John Joseph.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My local hospital was not selected for the new hospital programme. Well, I am happy for colleagues who today have some certainty on when work on their local hospital will start. Does the Minister recognise that there are hospitals, the length and breadth of this country, which are falling apart, and staff and patients deserve better? Will he commit to considering a wider estate plan for the rest of the NHS estates, especially in East Kent?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm really grateful to my honourable friend for his representation and actually for the outstanding work he's done representing his constituents since his election here. He makes a really important point that of that record investment the Chancellor and the Chief Secretary has given to my department for capital investment, the biggest allocation since Labour was last in government, £3 billion a year is allocated for the new hospitals programme. And of course, eagle-eyed people have noticed that there is a much larger sum available than £3 billion a year for capital investment, precisely because right across the health and social care estate there is a need for improvement and modernisation of existing estate, as I know from the representations that are piling into my inbox from my constituents who use Queen's Hospital in Romford. So I can assure him that we are looking across the board at the capital need in the NHS and social care and prioritising accordingly, and I'd be delighted to receive his representations.
Subjective.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Huntingdon, Hinchingbrook Hospital is one of the RAC hospitals for which funding has already been approved. But the hospital won't be allowed allocated grid space until Q1 2028, but will need it by Q1 2027 in order to keep the build on track. Additionally, traffic around the hospital is frequently gridlocked. A vital new access road is part of the plans, but the land where this would go is owned by Cambridgeshire Constabulary and National Highways, who are yet to give up the additional land they acquired via CPO when constructing Views Common Road. Would the Health Secretary meet with me to work through these blockers in order to meet Hinchingbrook Hospital's 2030 delivery date, given they are all being caused by government agencies? And can he confirm that the 2030 date is still the target?
I'm grateful to the honourable member for his representation. This government is on the side of the builders, not the blockers, and I can confirm to him that we are determined to start Hinchingbrook in 2027-2028. We work closely with the local project team, but we'd be delighted to receive representations about his frustrations with delivering that project.
Chris Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The last time the Secretary of State came to the Chamber to talk about the new hospital programme, I shared the story of taking my 93-year-old grandmother to the accident emergency at Milton Keynes Hospital, and when we got there, only to be told that the wait time was 9.5 hours. I'm afraid to say she was back there again earlier this month, and despite the tireless efforts of our incredible NHS staff, the brutal reality of 14 years of Tory neglect meant she didn't get the care she desperately needed and deserved. But it's not just my family. This is the lived experience of countless people across my constituency. So on behalf of my grandmother, my family, my friends and my neighbours, can I thank the Secretary of State for doing what the previous government failed to do and securing the extra funding that is needed for the new hospital in Milton Keynes. And can I ask that he continues to work with me and the other MPs across Milton Keynes in order to ensure that we get spades in the ground as soon as possible.
Secretary of State.
I'm extremely grateful to my honourable friend who has done so much with his parliamentary neighbours in Milton Keynes and Bletchley to get this scheme delivered and going as fast as possible. He underlines how important this is. This isn't just about bricks and mortar. This is about people's lives and life chances, and he's really brought that home with his powerful contribution. I can reassure him that pre-construction work is ongoing, with construction due to begin in 2027 to 2028, which I know will be welcomed by people right across Milton Keynes and beyond who use the hospital.
David Simmons.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My former constituency neighbour, Councillor Steve Tuckwell, chaired the planning committee which granted permission for the new Hillingdon Hospital, which serves my constituents and, for full disclosure, where my wife works as an NHS doctor. Those of us who are local residents then saw pre-construction works underway, including sewerage, electrics and demolition and strip-out beginning in the building. So will the Secretary of State apologise to my constituents affected by this for the delay that he's introduced to this project? And will he consider lobbying the Chancellor and the Prime Minister to cancel the Chagos Islands deal, the cost of which alone would fund 10 new NHS hospitals?
Secretary of State.
It is truly extraordinary, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we have a Conservative member standing up criticising a Labour government for delivering the Hillingdon Hospital project, which will begin construction, not pre-works, delivering in 2027-28, as I promised the people of Hillingdon. That's what we are delivering, and people should judge the contrast between a Labour government that is delivering and not just Conservative members, a Conservative Prime Minister who made the promises on 40 new hospitals, didn't follow through, walked away, and we're left picking up the pieces.
Emily Darlington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I first of all say happy birthday to the Secretary of State? And I can't think of a better birthday present than to give the people of Milton Keynes a new women and children's hospital. We are a growing city, and nowhere is it more needed in terms of population per bed. But can I get his reassurance for my constituency that the money has been found and allocated, because they feel they were taken for mugs after the scheme was announced by the previous government and the previous MPs more than 4 times, but never funded and never delivered?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for her birthday, which is even after I've announced the timetable that I know she wanted and her constituents wanted. But let me just say, on a serious note, I think people will see the contrast between sending Conservative members to Milton Keynes and the inaction and the broken promises, and sending Labour members from Milton Keynes who are delivering. I'm delighted with the work and the improvements that we'll be able to deliver for her constituents and for members right across the House, whichever wave they sit in. I hope that people know that with this government we have set out a timetable which is credible and deliverable, and a funding package which will be delivered for as long as there is a Labour government.
Ian Room.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents in North Devon were let down by the previous government and will be utterly dismayed to find that the remotest hospital in England has been passed over again for essential repairs beyond 2035. Does his department understand that if critical care and operating theatre facilities begin to fail within the next 5 years, as expected, there is no alternative critical care for patients over 40 miles? I also invite him to come and see for himself why investment is needed now, and to come and visit North Devon District Hospital, because it hasn't had a ministerial visit from this government. Thank you.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to the honourable member for his question, and I can tell his constituents that since his arrival he has been absolutely dogged in pursuit of health and care investment in his community. I can say to his constituents that we will deliver against this timetable. The funding is there and will be there for as long as there is a Labour government. And in the meantime, we'd be happy to work with the honourable gentleman to make sure that rural communities like his receive the investment they need. And my honourable friend, the Minister of State, or I would be delighted to visit at some point soon.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There's no doubt that this statement will be met with a deal of anger and frustration by my constituents. The hospital in Basingstoke is badly needed and they're not getting the health care that they deserve. But the honourable member for North West Hampshire called on me to consider my position. I would have called on him, were he still in his place, to consider his connection with reality. Yes. Because there is absolutely no doubt where the blame for that anger and frustration should lie, and that is with the benches opposite. They repeatedly told my constituents that the hospital was funded. It wasn't. They told us it would be delivered by 2030, and then they themselves delayed this fictitious plan until 2033. Exactly. And the honourable member has the gall to ask me to consider my position. I'm surprised he could make it to the chamber today, so weighed down he must have been by his brass neck. Yeah. Which brings me to my question. Can I ask the Secretary of State, and I welcome the clarity that he's brought to the scheme and to the House today, but can I ask, there were a number of hospitals that were in cohort 4, like Basingstoke Hospital, that have been moved forward, such as the Milton Keynes Hospital in Kettering. Of course, I'm delighted for my colleagues, but I'd be interested to know why they've been moved and why Basingstoke is where it is. And secondly, what confidence he can give my constituents that, unlike the previous government, the plan for this Basingstoke Hospital, they can be confident in it that it will be delivered as we have set out.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his question. I'm not surprised that Conservative members opposite tried to shout him down. They want to silence criticism of their records because they're so ashamed of it. That's the simple fact. And he's absolutely right that his parliamentary neighbour, who sat around the cabinet table of the notorious Liz Truss, even as she crashed the economy, and then has the temerity to turn up and lecture other people about sound management of public money. I mean, these people have no shame whatsoever, and they will have no credibility until they sincerely and honestly apologise to the country for the mess that they made. I'm very happy to talk through with my honourable friend and his constituents why his project has been phased as it has. There are a number of constraining factors, not just resources, but other factors such as allocation of land, planning and so on. But I can reassure his constituents that we will deliver, and I can also reassure his constituents that since his arrival in this place, my honourable friend has been absolutely dogged and determined in speaking up for them and lobbying on their behalf.
Rebecca Paul.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Secretary of State's clarification on timing of the new Sutton Specialist Hospital, which will serve my constituency. I'm really pleased that the project is going ahead, although the delay is disappointing. The current situation at Epsom and St Helier University Hospital Trust is not sustainable. The Trust currently runs duplicate services across 2 sites, which makes staffing incredibly difficult. The physical estate is deteriorating faster than it can be fixed, and some of the buildings are older than the NHS itself. I'd be grateful if the Secretary of State could set out how he intends to reduce waiting lists in Reigate, Redhill, Banstead and our villages in the short term in light of the delay to this project.
Secretary of State.
I can reassure the honourable member that in terms of the hospital, it's due to start construction in 2032, 2034, albeit my honourable friend, the member for Mitcham and Morden, had other ideas. And let me just say, when it comes to cutting waiting times, just earlier this month, the Prime Minister and I published this government's elective reform plan so that we can deliver the 18-week standard for referral to treatment that has not been met for a decade. I just say to the honourable member, had she been here during the last Parliament, she would be absolutely shocked at where the Conservatives led us, from the shortest waiting times and the highest patient satisfaction under Labour to the highest waiting lists and lowest patient satisfaction on record.
And the final question, Calvin Paley.
Madam Deputy Speaker, trust in the delivery of healthcare for people in Leighton and Wanstead has been damaged by 14 years of failed NHS policies and fake Tory promises for new hospitals, while knowing full well that they did not have the money to deliver them. They visited Whips 5 times for announcements, but delivered nothing, not a brick, not a penny, and certainly no hospital. While the delay confirmed today is disappointing, we welcome the honesty and the work to mitigate the impacts of Tory failure. The campaign for Whips Cross Hospital, however, is not over. As his team knows, we will continue to make other departments aware of the impacts to their housing programmes and continue to seek their support on his behalf. And I'm grateful for his remarks earlier about meeting to look at alternative funding methods. Will the Secretary of State confirm that funding for remediation and maintenance works will be made available to get our hospital to its Wave 2 start line?
I'm grateful to my parliamentary neighbour for his representation, and can I just reassure him, his constituents and mine for that matter, that thanks to the capital allocation provided by the Chancellor and the Chief Secretary who's in his place at the budget, we will be investing more in capital than at any point since Labour was last in office, because we recognise the capital funding pressures right across the NHS estate. We're determined to meet those pressures, clear up that mess that the Conservatives left behind. I just say, as I know right across the House and across the country, there will be real anger at the promises that were made by the Conservatives when people see the timetable as a work of fiction and the money wasn't there. I hope it is of some reassurance to know that this Secretary of State represents one of those communities that is also feeling let down by the actions of the Conservatives, as does the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And the way in which we have phased this scheme and the fact that both our schemes are in Wave 2 should reassure people that we are doing as much as we can, as fast as we can, within the constraints available. And I hope people take some comfort in the honesty, the credibility and the affordability of the timetable that we're setting out today. As long as there is a Labour government, the new hospitals programme will be delivered.
That concludes the health statement, and I will give the front benches just a moment and members some time to settle down.